I'm Dr. Jordin Wiggins, and this is the Pleasure Principles podcast. Join me on this journey where sex, science, and sensuality meet. Let's change the conversation around sex and pleasure together. Welcome. This week, we have an exciting episode of Girl Talk where I chat with two past graduates of the Pleasure Principles program. Both are moms with small children. This is a lesson in sisterhood and women supporting women. So even if you are not a mom, please listen in because I wish I had been able to hear a conversation this candid before I had children of my own. These ladies have become people I not only call friends, but also real mom supports. There's a difference, and it's not always something that's talked about openly. The moms who check in on their friends with small babies, who understand the reality and send you the messages that keep you going in the middle of the night when breastfeeding. It was so nice to talk openly and honestly about the highs and lows of mom life and the importance of remembering our own pleasure. I thank you, Andrea and Katelyn, for your time and your honesty. If you like this content and want to stay in touch with me, follow me at Dr. Jordin Wiggins on Instagram or visit thepleasurecollective.com to learn more about what we do.
I'm just so I just want to hear about how you experience you're the pleasure queen and
Yes.
I'm so curious how it's actually affecting your life and how you've overcome things.
Okay, so let's start here because I'm happy to share openly and also grateful for both of you and you guys reaching out, especially earlier on in those postpartum days. And I don't know what I would have done without a community. Because I'm I got this, I went to school for 8 years, the medical side of things, the nutrition side, the mental health side. I've done work on myself. This is, and I wasn't planning on being a mom. It was a pandemic. There was a COVID pregnancy, delivering in COVID, not having a community necessarily as much that way had its own challenges, but I can't believe the amount of support that I needed postpartum. It was crazy. The mood swings, the lack of sleep, the hormone fluctuations, and things that it's I wanted to coach myself or talk to myself, but it's I'm just having a big feeling that I can't change. So there was a ton of emotional ups and downs for me. And some days or moments, it's I'm killing this. This is amazing. This is the best thing ever. And other moments, it's newborn, pandemic, trying to run two businesses. I don't know what I'm doing and who I think I am. I just want to curl up in a ball and have someone take care of me. So I struggled for sure with my mental health. And this is also a question that I would like to ask because we say it's postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, mental health. We want to give it a label, but does it need a label or is it just that hard? Especially first pregnancy. What do you guys think?
I feel like it's a spectrum. I think people are reluctant to own that label because it seems extreme, right? But I think probably everyone experiences it to some degree. For myself, I think there were so many posts about some of the accounts that I would follow, and it just like hit the nail on the head of like what I was experiencing. And it's so hard to articulate that. And even with other moms, like it's hard to, yeah, like just really describe it in that way. But it just felt very validating to me to like read a post and be like, that's exactly what I'm experiencing in this postpartum state. And that alone was just like so supportive. But I think like I would feel like reluctant to say I had postpartum anxiety, because you would feel like, oh, it's disrespectful to someone who maybe like has it worse than I do or something like that, right?
Yeah. And there's this shame of, shouldn't I be loving this and every minute of it? And why am I feeling this way? Or it's not that bad.
Yeah. I still struggle with postpartum emotions. And, for me, I went through, I had a very traumatic birth. I had a near-death experience related to my daughter being born. And it was a big health scare. I developed severe preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome, which are both life-threatening conditions. And she was born via emergency C-section. And I didn't get to see her for the first 26 hours of her life while I fought for mine. And she was born 7 weeks early. And there was that, postpartum health for me that I had to, work through. And then her in the NICU for 3 weeks. And then coming home and just kind of settling in for, a month and a bit. And then the pandemic hit. That was really a big struggle. And I don't have a diagnosis. I never really had a label to put to it. And I don't think really that would have been helpful. I just knew that there was something not right. And having this community of the Pleasure Mindset Bootcamp and Pleasure Principles was really what I needed at the time.
And thank you so much for sharing the details, because to just even go back and relive and share is vulnerable and hard. And when we think, our pregnancy and our delivery is going to go one way and it doesn't, it's so traumatic. And then to layer on the pandemic after that, because I think everyone had that level of cognitive dissonance with the pandemic. Like, life's supposed to be one way, or we expect it to go one way, and then we're all locked in our houses and it goes another way. And that creates a lot of stress and anxiety and frustration and all these emotions. So I think everyone can relate to the pandemic piece, but it was basically like you went through two traumas back to back.
Yeah. And not having the support in a physical sense of having people being able to come over, especially my close family, like when there was those unknowns of, what this health pandemic really was like, and I have a premature baby, like it was really hard. And I had my husband here, but like he didn't really understand what I was going through either. So to have that online support and that community to connect to was so invaluable.
I definitely, and I even for me, like to hop on and coach or teach was one thing, but also to have you guys, like the graduates after the fact, and the connection of the community that lasted, because that was the stuff that saved me, was getting on the calls in the teaching format, or even having messages and DMs like checking on you. How are you, Katelyn? I think you shared some of those Instagram accounts with me that was like, okay, this is exactly how I feel. Mm-hmm. And then there was this cognitive dissonance for me, because I thought I'm fairly well educated, done a lot of work on myself. Why did I not know and get the depth of this experience. And I do feel like it is because there is some shame and people don't really talk about it. And even women that have been my patients or my friends for years, they would reach out and be like, oh, like, are you okay? How's it going? Oh, I remember I cried every day for 8 months, they would share or something. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this before? Like, why am I finding it out while I'm going through it? Were you prepared for the like motherhood, postpartum, everything that brings? Did you know what to expect?
Definitely not. I think I had some friends who were already mothers who, would try to give some insight, but I think until you're really in it and experiencing it for yourself, you don't really grasp the depths of it, because it's hard to relate when you haven't really experienced it yourself.
And the shame. I think there's
Yeah,
just so much shame, and you don't want to raise your hand and say, I'm struggling, because you think it somehow makes you a bad mother.
for sure. And that push through mentality, like, we're okay, or like we're feeling this way, but like, and I had this at the very beginning actually too. Like I pushed all of my feelings and all of my trauma and everything aside so I could be there for my daughter. And I think at the time I had to, but then it just caught up to me. Like, to always push through and put others ahead of yourself and not make yourself and your mental health and your emotional well-being and everything else a priority is really a disservice to you and to everyone else around you.
And that's hugely the messaging we get about being a mom, being a wife, is let me stuff my emotions, let me self-sacrifice, and let me care for everyone. And I knew that going in. I teach that stuff, but it was like all of these duties and tasks and things were just my responsibility. Like the roles were sort of assumed. And then there was like frustration and resentment. And did that happen, Katelyn? Was that happen for you in your relationship?
I think I remember with my second, like my neighbor came over and she kind of just said something to me like, you just have to let things be, like that you can't do all the things that you were doing before. And that was something that I think I just tried to like take a second child into stride with like just maintaining everything else that was the baseline of like running your house and keeping your house in order and all the things. And yet I just took on a second child and an infant, and that just wasn't a fair expectation on myself or our family. And I felt like the support system was entirely different with a second. It was way more intensive. I felt like for the first little while with a first, like I had my mother and mother-in-law like stay with us for a week or about that. We had some feeding challenges with my son in the first round, but it just felt like we were like on our own to just figure out life with too. And it was like, okay, I guess we
got it.
Yeah, like it just felt really like, not that we didn't have our support network, it was there, but it just wasn't there in the same way. And so that was, I think, something I had to kind of check myself on, was like, what standard am I holding myself to in terms of daily functioning and just unfair expectations.
I could not agree more. And I think my expectations for myself was I'm going to keep running both these businesses and do everything that I did. Plus, I'm going to add a baby. And it just doesn't work. There's only so many hours in the day, or you lose something in the process, like yourself, your emotional well-being, your physical health, like you mentioned, Andrea. So tell me a little bit about like, where were you both at when you first heard about Pleasure Principles, my work? Like, where were you at mentally, physically, emotionally? Andrea, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll actually never forget it. So my daughter was around 9 months or so, and I was changing her on the change table, and she was just so full of life and had so much joy in the simplest and smallest of things. And after everything that I'd been through, I realized that I had lost myself. And I saw this little baby on my change table, and so happy, and this sparkle, twinkle in her eye, and just finding joy in the simplest of things. And I used to be that little girl, and I didn't want her to lose that sparkle. And I realized that I had lost that myself, and that I really didn't have anything else that brought me joy besides her. And I didn't know what I wanted, what made me happy, what kind of things I like to do. Like, I just had lost myself. And it was right around the time that the Pleasure Mindset Bootcamp had popped up on Facebook. And it literally was divine intervention. I truly believe that. And I know you, Dr. J, like, you were my naturopath that played such a vital role in optimizing my health for preconception. And it was almost like it was coming full circle, because now I was in this postpartum season, and something just came over me that I needed to join this. And I really had no idea what it was about. No clue. I was like, what is this Pleasure Mindset Bootcamp? Like, it sounded, I was very intrigued, but I really had no idea what I was signing up for. But I just felt like I needed to join. And I was really hesitant, and there was a lot of resistance at first, because, you know, we live in the same area, and perhaps there would have been people who also joined that would have known me, or they're just really trying to be vulnerable. So that was scary, but I just did it. I felt like I needed to do it, and it changed my life.
And I'm so glad you did. I feel like that's when everyone finds my work, is there's this like signal that I put out, and then when you're ready, you're like you've lost yourself in your joy, you don't know what's next, you're like, this sounds good, but I'm also scared of it, and I don't really know what's next, but I'm showing up anyway. It's like this call inside you. Yes. So it is divine. It is divine timing for sure, because to do work of this depth, I think you need to be ready, and you almost need to be at a place, and I don't want to say like broken down, I want to say like almost broken open, that you're like, I'm ready for what's next, and I want the support to guide me. What about you, Katelyn? Where were you at in the beginning?
In the beginning, I would say I was kind of on the road to trying to find some outlets and resources. And I think I can't exactly remember when I started following you on Instagram and how I came to discover you. I really can't remember that, but I think I sought out that outlet through social media because it was a outlet for like just knowledge on sexual health, and just that's a unique offering, right? And so that was already underway for me to try and do some healing in terms of what was the state of kind of my like marriage relationship and our intimacy, and like it was a bad place, especially after like having my son, my first child. It was like a lot of fear and hesitation to get back into an intimate relationship after I had him. And it took like 6 months following his birth to resume any sort of intimacy, just because I didn't want to go back to a really bad and hurtful place. And so it just was very cyclical in terms of the pattern. And I just was feeling very hopeless of like, how do I get myself out of that spot? And so I had tried kind of self-help type things and outlets that were a little bit more like spiritual based in terms of like sexual identity and things like that. But so there were things that I had pursued, and then I distinctly remember feeling like before the boot camp even ever happened, like I would follow you. And I only tell you this so honestly now, because I know that I was just in a crusty, like negative place, but I would just be like, oh, it's so easy for her to like have this beautiful, awesome life because she doesn't have kids and she doesn't know. She doesn't know what it's like. And like, as though it's like play the victim, right? And so
but how far you've come. You're in your newly renovated house and you're not crusty, and you're calling out your own victim mindset. So
yeah, very like negative, like everything was negative related to sexual relations and intimacy, and there wasn't a lot of pleasure to be found there, and there was a lot of squeamishness and like uncomfortableness with even talking about it, let alone like even in our marriage, let alone like with other people, and just feeling very like lonely in that journey and not knowing where to get that support. And so it was, I would totally agree with Andrea, like it came through my feed or whatever, but it was like there was no question, there was absolutely no question that I was doing it. And we like went to Ottawa over the course of when it was being offered, and I would like have these like multiple feeds during the day because my daughter was like 6 months old, and I would like catch up on the lives when I was like breastfeeding her, and it was just like completely a week of just complete validation, complete like calling me out, felt totally seen in terms of like the community and what was being commented on, and just mind-blowing of like why haven't I been exposed to this before now, and really just life-changing. And so there was a lot of uncertainty. There was definitely a feeling of like, yes, that like this is what I need, this is all sounding completely good, but there was so much uncertainty about saying yes because it was so vulnerable, like so absolutely like scary to step into that unknown. And like, I mean, you were referencing people who were having completely life-changing experiences, and for someone who doesn't like change and is very like resistant to that, that was a very scary place to be in, because I was like, if I say yes, I don't want my life to change like to a point of me not recognizing my own life. And it was conflicting because it was like, well, why do I want to stay where I am when it wasn't a good place, right? I knew it wasn't a good spot to stay in. But yeah, I did, like, I mean, there was a lot of hesitation, but I think, very clear that I had to say yes to the next step of the pleasure principles. And even compared to the fall, I mean, it's been a slow, you don't realize where you're changing, but it does change you. It's only been like a year, and I'm in a different place now than I was in the fall. And I think I took on that work in a very difficult season of my life. And it felt like I was really challenged to do some of that work in that real time because of the state that I was in with the pandemic and child rearing and being on mat leave and all of that. So it had its challenges, but I think it is a journey, and it's not one that can be rushed necessarily, but it's just something that takes time.
And I think the beauty of the work, and this wasn't even anything that I intended, but you can go back to it at any time. Like that framework, the process that we're teaching you, you have it for life. You have your community, your sisterhood for life. So we can continue to expand and go back to it when we need to. So let's talk about some of the wins, or kind of like what the process was like for you, because I have some favorite memories of you both that we can, there's like times throughout the process where it's like, oh, she's getting it, and like I can tell that you're blossoming and it's coming, like it's all coming full circle. But tell me first, Andrea, I think one of my favorite memories of you was the, like, you were at a party and you danced or something, and maybe you don't even remember this, but
I do.
oh, you do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it felt small or insignificant or whatever for you, but tell us about your journey, and if you remember about that dancing time, and if you felt that like joy and you had a twinkle in your eye like your daughter, like tell us about that.
For sure. So yeah, this was during the pandemic, and we were able to get together with some of our neighbors, outside. And oftentimes I was very reserved. I had my baby with me at the time, and I was very protective mama bear, and quiet and shy, because I didn't really know them. Like, I was kind of getting to know them in the midst of a pandemic, and I had all of my postpartum struggles that I was going to, and I really wasn't comfortable being vulnerable to share that with them. But there was a time during the course that I was able to be around them without my daughter, and I really just adopted a pleasure mindset when I was there, and I was dancing and requesting, favorite music that I enjoy, and singing to. And I remember one of the neighbors telling my husband that, like, and seeing that I was having so much fun, and him relaying that to me, that other people were seeing that I was in my pleasure, really solidified like how important that the work is.
What other shifts had to happen? Because that's true. And this is like a microcosm of the work, right? This is just like one little fraction of an example of how things change. But tell us a little more about your journey and what it was like during the program.
So, like Katelyn, it was a very difficult season to really be able to fully commit to the work. My daughter was in the midst of teething. I was in the midst of trying to sleep train her, sleep deprived. So I really didn't have the time or energy or space to really dive in as deeply as I would have liked during the course. So I think after probably a few months afterwards is when I really started to snowball with some of my big shifts and my wins when I had the time and the space and the energy. But as you spoke of, having the framework to be able to go back to was so beneficial and invaluable, because I had the lessons and also the support of the girls in our group chat. And I was able to be vulnerable then, when I wish I would have been able to be a little bit more vulnerable during the course, but having the WhatsApp chat and the community like allow me to be vulnerable in that way that I was a little bit more comfortable with like written communication. So that was so invaluable to have that.
Like, what are some big shifts or big wins that you've had because of pleasure principles?
It's so hard to pinpoint, but I think putting pleasure at the forefront, like making it something that's a daily practice, and communicating that that's something that I need the space or the support, to be able to do things that bring me pleasure and fill my cup. My husband really was able to see the benefit of me doing that and how it shifted not just myself, but the entire household.
It's so true, because that's what we have control over, right? Is us. And for the most part, our partners are great and they want to make us happy. But if we're just like quietly over functioning and giving up ourselves and our wants and needs, and we end up so lost and so disconnected from who we are, then it comes out as rage, it comes out as resentment, demanding, neediness, whatever. And to be able to make that shift for you and not only know, okay, this is what I want, this is going to bring me pleasure, joy, make me happy, be able to communicate it to your partner and then have them be like, oh wow, things go really good when she's happy.
Yeah, that is a big thing, is I think the communication as well, and having that like framework, how to have those kinds of conversations, especially when they're around a sexual context, and you get into the male ego and different responsive behaviors. So having that was really helpful, but also being able to deliver those wants and those needs in a way that is a little bit more receptive and gentle, was also a big win for me.
For sure. And I think when you're in your pleasure and you can communicate it, it lands better, right? It's just so much more well received. Or if you're at a party and you're dancing and enjoying yourself and singing, and you're like truly in your joy, other people feel it, right? Like it's a ripple effect. It's the like pleasure, ripple effect, that they're all starting to like respond to you, but it's because it's authentic.
Yeah.
And it's like coming from inside, like your desires, which I think is so amazing. And think of what we could do if everyone on the planet, or 1 million women on the planet, operated that way. And then we taught our daughters, which brings me to another good question, which I will say in a second. Katelyn, I want to talk about your wins, and I want to say my moment for you, which we can know if we want to add this one in or not. But there was something that you had put in the chat about sex at the in-laws or something while your house was being renovated to your like beautiful specification that was in your pleasure. But what was that like, that shift? How did you get there?
Yeah, I feel like from where I was, I guess during the actual course, I think there was a lot of like newness to all of the content, and it was a slow exposure, I guess. At that point, it was like a lot of heavy exposure all at once. But over time, I think just by being one of the big things, I think for me is my comfort level of just like completely normalizing this type of conversation with the group, with my husband. Like, it is so polar opposite of what I used to like. I think there's still work to be done in terms of like communication actually during intimacy. Like, I think that is a big challenge for so many people, but like outside of the bedroom, there's just way more language behind these topics now. And I think that was such a empowering thing for me through the course, through just our group chat, in terms of even like pleasure was not a part of my vocabulary before last summer. Like, it was a word that was avoided. It was a squeamish word. Like, it was totally related to sexual type things. And so now that definition has completely broadened beyond just a sexual nature. And that's part of your work in terms of just broadening that, for sure. But I just really feel like there's so much more comfort in terms of just normalizing a lot of these topics, and being able to talk without shame, or like, I think I really bared the burden of feeling like responsible for the challenges that were in our marriage, and that it was a me problem. And there's always question of like, are my hormones out of whack? Like, is this like part of the problem? But I think it was so much more mindset based, and to reframe so much of that was so helpful. And to tackle things like, just I think there's been an overall more open-mindedness towards new things, like self-pleasure, to toys, to whatever. Like, it's just funny to think about how close-minded I was and where that came from. I guess I could probably pinpoint it to a few things, but I feel like it's just been an empowering experience to open my mind to different possibilities, because like, there's nothing in it to lose. Like, it's just going to improve our marriage, improve our relationship, and increase pleasure overall. And I think that part of my learning was accepting that it's meant for mutual pleasure. And that wasn't the case before. Like, I didn't know how to enjoy it. It was just so heavily negative, like just so heavily negative, that I just was so closed off to being intimate, because it just led to more conflict, or it led to me feeling hurt, or him feeling hurt, or it was just a really vicious cycle. So it was something that was so much avoided, because avoiding it was better than sometimes the outcome of doing it out of obligation and then having a hard time after.
And it's so fascinating to me that like we're taught, how to get driver's licenses, and we get degrees. Like, you both have professional careers. We learn these things, but then we learn all this negative and misinformation about sex and how to make sex pleasurable for both people and make sex something that both people want to do. We never learn it, but yet we expect it to function. Like, it's so backwards to me. The education should be standard. And two things, Katelyn. One, I want to send you, we've updated in our resource section, we have a couple more handouts about the dirty talk, like in the bedroom. So I want to send that to you, side note, but I didn't want to forget. And secondly, like we talked about the hormone thing at the beginning, and this is something that gets, I think, mixed up a lot. And we know postpartum, there's hormones, breastfeeding, when you're weaning, right? Like we need to, I think, give women so much more grace with it all, the sleep deprivation. But yeah, it's the like, is it me, my mindset, or is it my hormones? And I know we talked about it at the beginning, and you were breastfeeding and not sleeping great. So there's definitely a hormonal component to it, but also a ton of it is mindset. Do either of you feel like you learned like anything useful in school or like sex ed?
No, nothing. I don't even remember
No,
anything.
negative.
And that's
Definitely not.
why we need pleasure principles. Like we need a new approach, a new framework for sure. Somewhat of a side note or something, but I want to, maybe this is better at the beginning, but I had like postpartum for me, and thank goodness I had the community of pleasure principles, women, my friends, a good therapist. But the and yeah, like the framework of how to get back to my pleasure. So even when I found myself, like when you're breastfeeding, when you're pumping, when you're trying to do naps, and even if you have help, it's a lot. And especially if you feel like on all the time, because that was something that I realized in being at home during a pandemic, you're like mom all the time. You're not even going out for dinner and then letting someone else feed, bath, and put the baby to bed. Like you're home. So you're literally on in that stress response all the time. And we don't want to look at it like that, because then it's like, oh, don't you love being with your children or whatever? But like the way our nervous system responds is we're pumping out cortisol, we're in the sympathetic nervous state. We are not like, you can't relax and enjoy if you're on and you're doing. So it kind of like brought up some resentments for my partner, who could leave and everything more easily because he wasn't breastfeeding. Resentments about what my duties were, and resentments too, because just things like doctor's appointments and all of it is on me. And I have a helpful and supportive partner, and I know you both do as well. And it's some of it's these roles, but I found it so lonely, and I found my emotions were like extreme. Like my anger or my rage was extreme. Katelyn, did we talk about that I threw a Vaseline bottle, I think?
I think so. I don't know what caused it, but I do remember you saying I think I had a really bad something around that time too. So that was very
we had just,
validating.
for whatever reason, had connected, and we had talked about like the rage, and I'd unpacked it and looked at it and everything. And I threw it at the wall. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just like, needed a relief valve for the amount of like loneliness, rage, unmet needs that I had. Like just so many unmet needs, and learning how to communicate them and sift through them while being sleep deprived, while being hormonal, and using the framework and the communication tools did really help me through that time. Like I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have them. So it definitely created some strain on the relationship, and kind of being like, why don't you understand my experience? And And did you find that as well, that just like partners, husbands, they don't get it?
I think even like, and there's so much like, there's a big part of me that's like, how can I complain? Because I have a very supportive partner, and we share so much of the load, and our work-life balance is, I would say, better than most, and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are really helpful and supportive, but I don't know that they ever know fully what it's like to be mom, that I'm the preferred parent. Like it's always mom, mom, mom. And it just takes its toll. Like, and I do remember feeling so out of balance, like while we were doing the course in the fall, because pandemic, I had him at home through that entire part of my mat leave. And then I was now caring for both kids part-time, but like I would have both of them on my own. And that was the first point of my mat leave in doing that. And I just remember so vividly, like feeling in my body, like I'm not okay right now. Like I'm not okay. I'm so overwhelmed. And I just wanted to escape that feeling. And there wasn't a lot of options for escaping it, right? Like we were very limited with our pandemic life. And so I think just being kind of hypersensitive to noise and clutter and feeling so bored and restless in the state that I was in, it was not a good place to be. But, we moved through that, and I think there's a lot more balance established now. But yeah, it's hard for them to understand what that truly feels like to be mom and to have gone through all that's involved with postpartum. And yeah.
I agree. And I mean, should they even? Because that was the other thing. I think I was trying to do a lot of like, hey, this is what this experience is like for me, and trying to get the understanding and wanting to speak for like all women who've ever been postpartum, and like, you need to understand this, and how can't you understand this, and we need to change this and tell everyone, and have men trained on what to expect, because this is crazy. But then it was like, what really gave me the support was the community, like the community of women, the women that have been there, you guys, like my friends. So yeah, it's interesting though. And like, if our needs aren't being met and we're like touched out and overworked and burnt out, and then our partners are like, hey, you want to have sex, or like it just can really perpetuate an interesting dynamic. Andrea, what about you? Was there like resentment? And
Big time. There was a lot of resentment. I think, like as you talked about, always feeling that you had to be on, that I was breastfeeding, so she wasn't taking a bottle anymore. So I was always the one feeding her and responsible for, introducing solids, and kept track of allergens and all of those things that related to her health. And I think I also took that on, being a healthcare professional. So, but having that responsibility on me was a lot. And I think there was a lot of resentment around that it felt like that fell on my shoulders. And I had, a bit of resentment as well, that I just didn't feel that he did fully understand what I was going through. And like he was saying, like I feel bad complaining or saying that I don't, like he is a very supportive partner. But there were times where I really did feel alone and misunderstood with what I was going through, because he just didn't understand. And I think I've come to realize that he's a man and I'm a woman. We're completely, different people that way. And with the way that we think and the way that we process and the way that we cope with things. So, but not always having that emotional space to go through all of that, and entering the journey into motherhood, with birth trauma and then preemie and then the pandemic and everything. Like it was a lot. So there was definitely resentment kind of when I would see him. He's a very happy-go-lucky guy, glass half full, which is amazing. And I really look up to him for that. But I also resented the fact that like he had a different experience than I did.
It's like, why is this easy for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think
I don't think it was easy. Now I kind of reflect on it. It was just, he dealt with it in a different way.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think you hit it on the head, is that there's different. It's different.
Yeah.
And to have women in a community of women in this type of support, I think that is what we need, even more so than our partners to understand it. I think what I think men need to know is like, hug her, hold her, and ask her, what is one thing that I can do in this moment to lighten your load? That's what I think would be very helpful. What if you guys had advice for the men listening, the partners listening? What do they need to hear?
Yes. Like you said, a hug, and I'm the kind of person too that like I'm a bit resistant to it. So like just pull me in for a hug and tell me that it's going to be okay, and just hold space. I think we're really programmed to feel like we always need to fix people, or we always have to give solutions or ask what's wrong, and sometimes you don't even know what's wrong or why you're crying, and that's even more frustrating and perpetuates the emotions even more so because you don't know. So just so much hold crying. That space.
So much crying. I pretty much cried every day, probably for the first 6 months, and couldn't always name it either. Sometimes it was joy, sometimes it was who knew. Sometimes it was rage or fear or sadness. And when you're going through all of these emotions in a pandemic, it's crazy. It's so crazy. Katelyn, do you have any advice for partners?
I think I just appreciated so much like being told you're doing a great job, you're a great mom. Like that makes, when on days where things go smoothly, it's nice to hear that, but it's even more powerful to hear it when you've just gone through a struggle, or big emotions with your toddler or something, like just to give you that boost of it's going to be okay. This, like, the majority, give you that perspective of like, this is just this isn't happening all the time, right? Give that perspective of like, this sucks right now in this moment, but like, on the whole, this isn't our life. Like, and I think there's so much pressure that I put on myself, at least in terms of avoiding those hard situations, like, and like just giving acknowledgement to like, that's just part of their childhood development, and that's not a reflection on necessarily me being a bad mom, or acknowledging that
it's all our fault. We think everything's our fault.
And the pressure to know what to do all the time in these always evolving developments of a child's life and how they act differently. Like, you have to have the mentality of, you have to learn as you go, because I felt that very strongly, like a few months ago, was just feeling so inadequate because I didn't, in those moments of like, oh my goodness, my toddler is having like this meltdown, like, and my approach isn't working, or like my default modes are not helpful, or maybe going to traumatize them later in their life and create like worst case scenario thinking. Like, you know, there's just so much pressure that we put on ourselves to get it right. And I just don't think that's fair.
I think this might help you. And first of all, human to human, the fact that you're thinking like that and you know that you have a default mode to go to is, you are an amazing mother just by being aware of that. Also, I read, because I had a super panic when I knew I was pregnant, like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to be a parent. I don't want to parent from my trauma, from my default modes. Like, how am I going to do this? I want to raise kids this way. What do I do? Anyways, there's a lot of research to support that you only need to meet children's emotional needs 33% of the time accurately to make them like well adjusted. And I was like, okay, because I can't get this right every time. Like
100%. Yeah, that's a high standard. That is relieving. That's very relieving.
Yeah, but it was a third of the time to meet their emotional needs, like to see them and validate them and all of that. So I was like, I can do this.
That is realistic.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought so. All right, last question, maybe second last question. What do we want? What learnings from the Pleasure Mindset Bootcamp, Pleasure Principles, what do we want to pass on to our children? What do we want them to know that we didn't know ourselves?
For me, so I actually wore this shirt with intention, and it says be the change, because really the start of this work was for my daughter. And with learning everything that I did through the Pleasure Mindset Bootcamp and through Pleasure Principles, I really want her to know that pleasure and being in your pleasure is not selfish, and to be comfortable with using that term in her vocabulary. As Katelyn had mentioned, like, it was not something that was really part of my vocabulary as well growing up, and we just kind of knew it in the context of sexual, and that it was bad, or something, you're doing something wrong, or those belief systems that we grew up with. As I was raised Roman Catholic, so sex before marriage was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So those kinds of things, I want those wounding messages to stop with me, and I want her to unapologetically be herself, and to put her wants and her needs and her deepest desires at the forefront, and to be herself and prioritize pleasure and practice it as a daily thing, and not feel bad about it, and not feel like it's something that it's selfish, because it's not. It's just going to make her and everybody else around her that much better. So I think another Pleasure Principles grad coined this term, but it's really like wanting that generational pleasure for her and for the generations to come. And yeah, I just want her to always feel safe and secure within herself, and that she could always go back to what she feels is good for her and what brings her joy and pleasure, regardless of what anybody else thinks, says, believes. I just want that for her.
I love that. so much. I want to just take that little snippet because it's like that's like the pleasure collective mission statement. So I just want to take that snippet and for like all of my hires and everyone is just like, watch this. And if you don't agree, you're not a fit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that joy, like that joy, that childlike joy that they have, that twinkle in their eye, the way that they see the world for the first time, like for that to not go away. Because I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I think like over the years, I feel like I lost that in myself, and I'm starting to come back to who I am authentically within myself, but it's hard.
I created the Pleasure Collective because I lost myself twice. And then again, becoming a mom. And with the becoming a mom, I wouldn't even necessarily say it was like a losing. It was just like a total, like, I wasn't who I was before. And it was like an opening or a growing, right? Like the caterpillar to butterfly thing. It was just another level.
Motherhood changes you.
For sure. Like, because you're literally not the same person and you can't be. And yeah, we need pleasure principles postpartum edition.
Postpartum pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. Because the whole like matrescence thing and just becoming a mom overnight and like your identity and who you think you are and all of that changing is a lot.
And you're supposed to know how to change with it. It's too much.
Yeah, it is.
To try to navigate it all by yourself too. It's not possible.
Exactly. We need the community and we need the support. I would not have been able to do it without the like, and it's like I created this community and I created this business because I needed it myself. And then to be able to have both of you reaching out when I was postpartum, like and to feel seen and like, oh my God, I'm not alone, and have that normalize is just so like, it's such a gift. And I want all women postpartum to have that.
There's so much like conflict. I think there's a lot of posts about like right? Like that we can be so irritated by our kids and love them like so much in the same moment, right? Like they can drive you so crazy, and yet they bring out so much joy and pleasure by being in their presence. And like it is so amazing to witness how in the moment they are. And I just remember feeling over the course of the year like that is such a amazing experience by just they demand that of you to just be so present. And it's hard when you have like a bazillion things that you're trying to accomplish, but I think like to just slow down and like actually watch them and connect, like it's a really, really amazing experience that brings so much pleasure as a mom. But for me, I think in terms of the difference that I see in myself, like I would describe myself historically as being the responsible one, not being a risk taker, being very closed-minded to possibilities, suggestions. It would just be a real quick no and just shut that down, not even entertain certain ideas. And now I feel like that has shifted, and I feel very empowered through this process to create my own happiness, right? That power lies within yourself, and you're responsible for that. You're not just a victim, or you're not just at the mercy of, yes, life is going to throw you curveballs and, all of that, but you are in control and you can decide whether or not something is in your pleasure. And if it's not, then you have the power to change that and to make decisions to make that change. So I just feel like there's a lot more ownership in creating it. And I think it's hard in this season of my life to maybe accomplish it on a large scale, or feel like that's attainable, but it's in the small little things in your day that you have to just protect in a really intentional way. And like, it could be as simple as, like, this week I've been holding off having a coffee like first thing in the morning, and I just let it sit there until my kids are off to daycare, and then I put it in like a Yeti so it's not going to get cold, and then I just like enjoy it while I like start my work day, right? So it's just like little things like that actually giving it a little bit more space to actually feel enjoyable versus rushing through something. Or like, I know I was in a really good habit, and with the pandemic and lockdowns, it just kept shifting these like patterns that you would get into. But I was in a good pattern of like having a walk at lunchtime and listening to a podcast or like something just for me. And it's really hard to find those opportunities in your day when you're with kids and with your like partner's schedule. It is hard to find those opportunities, but I think it is just trying to like give yourself some reassurance that it can be in just little small ways too.
Yeah, small and big doses of pleasure for sure. And don't sell yourself short, Katelyn, because we got your house is renovated, your view of sex has changed. Like, you've had the big shifts and the little, right? So you both have killed it and done so amazing with the work, and you continue to over a year later, which is so impressive. And I'm like in awe that you're still learning and still growing and want to pass it on. Anything else you wanted to say? That
I think when it comes to passing it down to my kids, like I hope that we do a better job by our kids by normalizing things. And what that looks like specifically, I couldn't say in terms of knowing when is the right time to have certain conversations, but I hope just by my comfort level increasing and improving, and to know in a real way that like intimacy and sexual expression in a marriage, in a relationship, like it is important. And what does that look like as like your kids start to date or find a partner of their own long term. Like I'm hopeful that it will somehow just come through in terms of my children's understanding, and that I'll be equipped with like passing down those lessons to them, because I certainly don't feel like I was equipped with any kind of information that, I think that really could have directed a pathway very different than what I found myself on.
We have a pleasure focused sex education for kids in the works. It won't be launched in the next few months or anything, but it's definitely coming, because the need's there, right? To not want to pass on all of the negativity and have accurate information. And regardless of that, though, what I do know and what I have seen from other grads in doing the work for years is by you being in your pleasure and doing the work, like you are passing it on just by living your life with pleasure focus. They are picking up on that more so than any like birds and bees conversation or whatever. If you are showing them like, what do you desire, what's in your pleasure, what's not, like you're teaching them consent, you're teaching them to value themselves, you're teaching them to value what feels good. So literally by both of you doing the work and continuing to doing the work, it's passing down already.
And thank you for really being the leader in showing us the way and how to do the work. It's such invaluable tools and education that we can give to them. And I think it's so important to really expand on the context of what pleasure actually means, that it's not just purely sexual, that it's emotional, spiritual, physical as well. And like to have them have that language and that understanding of what that means. I think growing up, when I think back, I was witness to it from my parents and especially my mom. Like she would go out, once a week at nighttime and go to her women's bowling league, and I didn't really understand that was something that she liked to do, that it was in her pleasure, and that it was something that filled her cup. And I didn't have the understanding and perceived it more in the way that it was negative, like she didn't want to spend time with me or I was being abandoned. So I think having that language and that understanding of how pleasure is a good thing is just such an important lesson to teach.
Yeah, and it's self-generating, like pleasure begets pleasure. And for you to be able to say to your kids, like, I will play video games with you after I take a bath, or, I need to go, I'm going to my bowling night, but like, what's in your pleasure? Or what can we do? Like having the tools to not only understand it, but also have these conversations in a way that everyone feels seen and fulfilled and heard is huge.
For sure.
Because
and knowing why you're doing it. Like how many times the kids ask, why mommy, why? Like to be able to explain it in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you both so much for one, like taking a chance on me and my work, because I know that it is that vulnerability when you're going to click the button to join the Facebook group and you're not quite sure why you're there or what is going on. But like, not only that, but to do pleasure principles and continue the work and also be there for me as mothers, sisters, humans, like that. It really means so much, like more than I can even put into words. So thank you both. Have a great week, everybody. If you like what you heard in this episode, leave me a rating. Your support helps me get discovered by more women like you. Together, we can change the conversation around women's sexual health and pleasure for you, your partners, and generations to come.